Hey guys, tonight we are diving into a place you probably think you know very well, the medieval castle. Tall stone towers, banners fluttering, knights polishing their armor, maybe even a princess in the highest room. You've seen it in movies, read it in fairy tales, and maybe even visited a restored one on a sunny afternoon. But tonight, you don't get to be a tourist with a guide and a camera. You're not here for the tour, where you marvel at the architecture and then leave for lunch. Tonight, you actually live here. No warm hoodie, no phone, no central heating, no modern bathroom. Just you, a medieval castle, and the faint hope you'll survive until morning. Before we get started, dim the lights, get comfortable, maybe pull up a blanket, and as always, let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching this, and if you think you'd last more than a day here. I have my doubts. You wake to the sound of boots clanging on stone floors above you, a rhythm that is as jarring as it is endless. It's early, so early that the sky outside the arrow slits is still gray, not sunrise yet, but in the castle, dawn is a working hour. Servants are already stirring, moving firewood, fetching buckets of water, brushing down horses in the stables. Your bed, if you can call it that, is a straw mattress laid over wooden boards, the straw long past fresh, flattened by weeks of restless turning and alive with things that also woke up before you did. The castle is alive with more than people. Fleas, lice, and rats are your roommates. The air is so cold you can see your breath drift in pale clouds. You pull a rough woolen blanket closer, scratch at your skin, and wonder if you really want to start the day. You sit up slowly, bones stiff from the chill, and you notice the smell. You expected stone to be clean somehow, but it isn't. The corridors carry every odor from every chamber, and there is no modern ventilation to save you. There's smoke from the kitchens that stings your eyes. There's the sour tang of unwashed bodies crammed together in small rooms. And there's something sharper coming from the garderobes, the castle's so-called toilets, which are really little more than holes in the wall where waste drops down into cesspits or the moat below. Imagine every guest at a castle party sharing a bathroom designed like that. And now imagine that smell never quite leaving. You rub your teeth with a cloth dipped in salt, because toothbrushes as you know them haven't been invented yet. Your gums sting, your mouth tastes vaguely like blood and iron, but it's better than nothing. If you're highborn, you might chew a sprig of mint or parsley to disguise your breath. If you're not, you just hope everyone else is too distracted by their own problems to notice yours. You splash water from a basin across your face, the shock of it enough to wake you fully. Bathing, in the sense you know it, isn't part of your daily routine here. At best, you'll wash your hands and face, maybe change your linen underclothing when they're filthy enough to crawl away on their own. You pull on layers of rough wool clothing. Undergarments are scratchy, over that a tunic, maybe hose for your legs, and a pair of leather shoes stiff from the damp. If you're serving in the castle, you don't get rich colors or embroidery, just practical cloth and muted shades, the kind that won't show stains. The air still nips at your nose, but once you step into the corridor, the movement of other bodies creates a thin illusion of warmth. You shuffle through a corridor lined with tapestries, those woven hangings meant to keep heat in and drafts out. They help a little, though you can feel the cold sneaking around the edges. Servants rush by carrying firewood, their arms piled high, careful not to let the logs clatter to the stone floors. Others carry baskets of bread, pitchers of weak ale, or pails of water. Water is a constant job in the castle, drawn up from the well in the courtyard or carried from a stream nearby, always heavy, always spilling. You follow the scent of bread into the great hall. It's dim, smoky, and filled with the low hum of voices. In the center, a hearth blazes, the fire smoke curling upward toward a hole in the roof, though much of it drifts sideways, filling the hall with a permanent haze. Breakfast isn't a feast. If you're lucky, you get coarse bread, maybe dipped in pottage, a thin stew of whatever grains or vegetables are left from yesterday. On rare mornings, there's a slice of cheese or a bit of salted pork. Nobles might eat later in the morning, but the workers, guards, and servants need fuel now. You tear at the bread with your teeth. It's dense, dark, and gritty, because millstones often leave bits of ground stone in the flour. Imagine chewing something that wears your teeth down with every bite. You wash it down with ale, not because you crave alcohol at dawn, but because water can be dangerous. Wells get fouled, streams carry disease, but ale, weak as it is, has been boiled and is safer to drink. Children drink it too. Across the hall, you hear the scrape of a chair, the thump of boots, the clatter of armor. Guards are changing shifts. Their breath hangs in the air, their chainmail jingles with every move. Their faces are ruddy from cold, hands rough from carrying weapons all day. Life for them is no easier. They patrol the battlements in icy wind, eyes straining over fields that are often empty, but could at any moment hide an enemy. Someone bumps into you, mutters an apology. The hall is crowded, people moving in every direction, servants darting between benches, dogs weaving under tables, snapping up crumbs. In a corner, a joker yawns and stretches, his bells muffled in the smoky air. He'll be expected to entertain later, whether anyone laughs or not. You finish your bread, stand and wipe crumbs from your tunic. The morning is only beginning. Outside the hall, the castle is already alive with clamor. The forge hammers ring as the blacksmith beats iron into shape. The sound is sharp, echoing off stone walls. In the stables, horses snort and stamp, their smell sharp and musky, hay sticking to their coats. Servants shovel muck into piles, the stink carrying downwind. You hold your sleeve to your nose and keep walking. A guard stops you at a doorway, asks what your errand is. You mumble something about helping in the kitchen, and he waves you on, not because he believes you, but because he really doesn't care. Castles are strict hierarchies, but they're also chaotic, crowded worlds where everyone looks busy, whether they are or not. The kitchen is a world of its own. It's hot, even this early. Smoke stings your eyes, spits of fat jump from cauldrons into the air. A pig turns on a spit, its skin crackling, grease hissing as it drips into the fire. Someone stirs a pot taller than your waist, wooden spoons scraping against the iron sides. The air is thick with onions, meat, and wood smoke, all tangled together until you can't tell one from the other. A boy carries a tray of trenchers, thick slabs of stale bread that will serve as plates for the Lord's dinner. They're hard enough to knock someone out with, but in time they'll soften under meat juices and be eaten too, or tossed to the dogs. You lean against the wall, already sweating in the heat, and realize this is only the start. You've survived an hour or two, maybe, in the medieval castle. The cold, the smell, the food, the crowd, the endless labor, and somehow this is considered normal. You look around at people working with the resigned rhythm of those who know no other life. You wonder if you'll make it through the day, or if this place will swallow you whole before the sun even reaches its peak.
You've managed to stagger through the earliest hours in the castle, and you're still breathing, which is more than can be said for some who lived here centuries ago. Now the morning stretches ahead, and the work does not ease. Castles are not places of leisure, except for the very few perched at the top. For everyone else, survival is measured in buckets carried, fires stoked, and orders obeyed without hesitation. The stone walls do not rest, and neither can you. You step back out into the bailey, the castle's courtyard, and the noise hits you like a hammer. Clattering hooves from horses being led out, the pounding of a blacksmith's hammer against iron, the shrill call of a servant boy trying to wrangle geese that were somehow allowed inside. Everything echoes against stone walls until your ears buzz. There is no quiet corner, no serene fairy tale balcony. The castle is alive, and it's not gentle about it. You're sent to help carry water from the well. It seems simple until you try it. The bucket creaks in your hands, iron handle biting your palms, water sloshing with every uneven step across the cobblestones. It's heavier than you thought, and after the third trip, your arms burn as if you've been wrestling with oxen. No gym membership needed here. Servants of the castle perform this task every single day, dozens of times. In heat or frost, and sickness or health, there's no negotiation, no excuse. Without constant hauling, the kitchens would fall silent, the guards would complain, the Lord would rage. You pass near the laundry yard, where women bend over tubs, pounding cloth with paddles, rinsing in cold water drawn from the same well. Soap is rare. More often they use lye or ashes, and the smell is acrid. The steam rising from the tubs smells faintly of wet wool and wood smoke, not fresh linen. They scrub until their hands crack, red and raw, and even then the garments are not what you'd call clean. Stains linger, odors cling, but compared to the grime of unwashed clothes, it's an improvement. A guard shouts for the gates to be opened, and you watch as a cart laden with supplies rattles across the drawbridge. Barrels of salted fish, sacks of grain, wheels of hard cheese. The goods will be stored deep in the castle's storerooms, behind thick doors where rats scuttle in the shadows. Imagine chewing into bread and realizing half of it was nibbled before you by something with whiskers and a tail. It's not uncommon. Cats are kept around, not as pets, but as pest control units, expected to earn their keep. The sun climbs higher, thin light spilling over the walls, though inside the castle it still feels dim. Narrow windows don't let much in. You follow a servant through twisting corridors that smell of damp stone and smoke. You're told to deliver a message to the Lord Steward, which takes you into a slightly more refined part of the castle. Here the air is marginally warmer, thanks to a brazier smoldering near the wall, and the floors are covered with rushes, dried plant stalks scattered to soften footsteps and absorb spills. At first you think it's an improvement, until you notice the darker patches where food, ale, and worse have seeped in, turning the rushes into a breeding ground for insects. Every few weeks they're replaced, but in the meantime the smell lingers, sour, moldy, unnameable. The steward barely glances at you, his attention consumed by accounts written in cramped script. Parchment isn't wasted on nonsense. Every inch is filled with records of grain, rents, and supplies. Literacy is rare, but in the castle, it's a weapon more powerful than swords. The steward mutters something about shortages, sighs heavily, and waves you away. Back in the courtyard, the training yard is alive with grunts and the clang of metal. Young squires practice with wooden swords, their blows loud and clumsy. Instructors bark commands, correcting stances, shoving shoulders into place. Training is relentless. The bruises are constant. You flinch as one boy takes a strike across the knuckles and yelps in pain. Another vomits from the exertion and is told to keep going. No one cares if you're tired or hurting. The castle demands strength and obedience, not comfort. You linger too long watching and are shoved by a passing cook, hauling a basket of turnips. You mutter an apology in retreat, but the cook doesn't hear you over the noise. He has bigger concerns, getting food to the kitchens before it rots, making sure there's enough to stretch across dozens of mouths. Vegetables are limited to what can be stored or pickled. Meat is a luxury, and spices are rare treasures reserved for the noble tables. If you imagine a banquet every night, you've been fooled by legend. A horn blows from the battlements. Everyone in the courtyard freezes, then resumes moving when it's clear the signal was for practice only. But the thought lingers. What if it had been a real alarm? In times of siege, the castle is both refuge and prison. You'd be sealed inside these walls for weeks or months, relying on dwindling stores, choking on the smoke of too many fires, and listening to enemies camped just beyond your walls, waiting for you to starve. It's a nightmare that hangs over every stone. You wipe your hands on your tunic, though they never quite feel clean, and look around. You've survived a morning of hauling, choking, sweating, and dodging orders, and it isn't even noon. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. Your clothes itch, and your ears ring from the noise of hammers and voices bouncing endlessly between walls. You realize, with creeping dread, that this isn't an unlucky day. This is the routine. In modern life, you might complain about traffic, emails, or waiting in line for coffee. Here, your complaint is that your water bucket is heavier than your arm can carry. that the smoke makes your eyes water until you can barely see, that every corner of the castle smells like damp straw and onions, and yet no one else seems to notice. They've lived it so long, it's the only normal they know. You stand in the middle of the courtyard, dizzy from exhaustion, and understand why surviving a single day here is an accomplishment. And the day is far from over. The castle still has countless tasks waiting, and you're expected to keep pace, no matter how much your legs tremble or how raw your hands feel.
By the time the sun has crept to its highest point in the pale sky, you've already lost track of how many steps you've trudged across uneven stone. Midday in the castle isn't a pause for rest, it's another kind of chaos. Bells toll, signaling that it's time for the main meal of the day. You'd expect everyone to drop tools and gather at once, but the castle doesn't work like that. Rank decides where, when, and even how you eat. If you're a servant, your turn comes only after every noble mouth has been fed. The Great Hall is already alive with sound before you even step inside. Long wooden tables creak under the weight of trenchers, those thick slabs of bread that double as plates. Torches flicker along the walls, their smoke hanging thickly in the rafters. Dogs prowl underfoot, snapping at scraps that fall or are tossed deliberately to them. Musicians hover in a corner, plucking strings and blowing on pipes, their music half drowned by the roar of voices. You are reminded quickly that etiquette is a battlefield as treacherous as any fought with swords. Nobles have a pecking order so strict that sitting in the wrong spot or reaching too early for a dish could brand you as insolent. Higher lords sit at the top table with the best cuts of meat, while others slide lower down toward the scraps. Servants hover like nervous bees, pouring weak ale into cups and carving hunks of beef or pork into uneven slices. The smell is overwhelming, a heavy blend of roasting fat, sharp garlic, and unwashed bodies packed shoulder to shoulder. Spices like pepper, cinnamon, or saffron appear here and there, precious imports meant to show off wealth more than improve flavor. You glance down at your own trencher, its surface quickly soggy with greasy juices. Later, when the meal is done, the softened bread may be eaten by poorer folk or thrown to the hounds. Nothing is wasted. As you eat, you hear the steady rhythm of knives on wood, the loud gulps of ale being drained, and the occasional cough. There are no forks here, not yet. You tear with your hands, smear sauces across your tunic, and try not to look like a barbarian in front of people who are, frankly, not much neater than you are. Washing hands before and after is the polite expectation, but in a hall this size, many skip the courtesy. A noble across the table picks his teeth with a small knife, chatting idly about hunting. Another brags about the hawks in his mews, while a lady complains about damp draught sneaking through her chamber tapestries. Gossip and politics hum in the air, words sharper than the blades on the table. One ill-placed joke, one muttered criticism of the Lord, and you could find yourself in trouble deeper than any latrine chute. When the Lord finally rises, the hall quiets as though a spell has been cast. His departure signals the meal's end, and one by one, others push back benches and drift away. The leftovers are carried out to feed the lower ranks. By the time you're handed a bowl, the good meat is gone, replaced with stewed vegetables and lumps of bread soaking in thin broth. It fills your stomach, but brings no joy. After eating, there is no nap, no leisurely stroll. Duties call again. Some head to the kitchens to scrub cauldrons blackened with soot. Others sweep rushes off the floor, trying to disguise the mess of spilled ale and bones scattered by dogs. You're told to help haul refuse to the midden heap beyond the outer wall. The stench is indescribable. Rotting food, dung, ash, all piled together. You pinch your nose and stumble away, the smell clinging to your clothes as if it means to follow you forever. Back inside, you're sent to assist in the solar, the Lord's private chamber where his family spends much of the day. Here the atmosphere is slightly gentler, tapestries muffling the echoes, candles burning steadily. Women sit at embroidery frames, needles flashing in the dim light. Children play with carved wooden toys or chase each other underfoot. It feels warmer, more civilized. Yet you notice the fleas leaping across the rushes and the soot smudges creeping up the walls near the fireplace. No chamber is immune from the castle's realities. The Lord himself conducts business, meeting with stewards and messengers, listening to disputes from tenants who've made the journey inside the walls. You're invisible here, standing silently until someone barks for more ale or parchment. The conversations drift around you, rents unpaid, fields ruined by rain, and the threat of bandits on the roads. Power radiates from this room, yet even here the stone walls seem to press inward, as though reminding everyone that their lives are trapped within its cold embrace. By mid-afternoon, the castle shifts into a quieter hum. Knights train in the yard, their steel ringing against shields in a rhythm that grows familiar. Falconers tend to their birds, leather gauntlets outstretched as the hawks shift and ruffle their feathers. In the chapel, a priest chants softly, his Latin echoing across the stone. Incense curls through the air, almost masking the other smells clinging to your clothes. You find yourself drifting from task to task, always under someone else's command. The hours stretch endlessly, punctuated only by new orders and the aching reminder that your body isn't built for this. Your arms throb from carrying buckets, your back protests each bend and lift, your feet are blistered in stiff leather shoes. You glance at the sun lowering toward the horizon and realize this is only halfway through. And as the light fades, torches are lit one by one, their flames spitting as resin catches. The castle will not sleep soon. Its rhythm is relentless, carrying you toward an evening you already dread.
As the afternoon leans into evening, the castle takes on a different rhythm. The sun sinks, shadows lengthen, and that strange chill settles into the air again, no matter the season. The stone walls breathe cold. Your arms ache from hauling, scrubbing, fetching, but you're told the day isn't close to done. Knights and squires still clang in the yard, their wooden swords snapping against shields with dull thuds. The metallic ring of steel practice cuts carries higher, sharp and dangerous, echoing into the courtyards. You pause for a moment to watch, only to be shoved along. Spectators are tolerated if they belong, but you're just another set of hands, and hands are meant to be busy. You're ordered to help stack firewood near the Great Hall hearth. Sounds simple until you realize how much wood a castle devours daily. Those vast halls with their gaping chimneys consume trees at a rate that would make modern fireplaces seem laughably modest. And yet, despite mountains of timber crackling in the grates, the warmth barely reaches beyond a few feet. Castles were not built for comfort. They were fortresses. Insulation was never part of the blueprint. The hall begins to stir again as the evening meal approaches. A smaller, simpler affair than the midday feast, but still noisy. Bowls of pottage, a thick stew of grains, beans, and vegetables steam on the tables. Whatever meat remains from earlier is chopped into the mix, creating a consistency somewhere between glue and soup. You don't complain, it warms your insides at least. Nobles again eat first, their food slightly richer, but the hierarchy repeats itself with numbing predictability. Dogs roam freely, sniffing under benches. One nearly topples a jug of ale, drawing laughter from a cluster of men-at-arms. The air is smoky, greasy, and loud, though perhaps less boisterous than earlier. Ale flows steadily, a safer bet than water, which no one trusts. As you sip, you notice the pang of smoke clinging to your tongue, a reminder that nothing in this place comes without a layer of discomfort. After the merriment dies down, the work shifts again. Servants scurry to clear the hall, scrape the tables, gather bones for the midden. Some benches are dragged aside so guards and lesser folk can roll out rough blankets or cloaks, ready to sleep here. The lord and his family retreat to their private chambers where the rushes are fresher and the bedding is thicker.
though fleas and lice are as democratic as they come. You're shown to a corner where you're expected to rest. The floor is hard, the rushes smell faintly of urine and ale, and the mutter of voices drifts around you. Someone nearby coughs, a wet, hacking sound that makes you instinctively turn away. There is no privacy, no peace. Above, smoke creeps toward the beams, lingering like an unwanted guest. You try to imagine yourself warm, but the cold crawls in. You shift, wrapping your arms tighter, listening to the creak of the timbers and the muffled sounds of guards changing shifts along the battlements. The castle never truly sleeps. Footsteps echo, dogs bark, a door slams somewhere distant. Your body aches for silence, but it will not come. And then you remember, tomorrow will be the same. The same labor, the same smells, the same feasts where you're lucky to gnaw on damp bread. You are beginning to realize that a day in this place isn't about survival in the dramatic sense of sword fights and sieges. It's survival in the smaller, crueler ways, enduring discomfort, sickness, cold, and endless toil without complaint. As you close your eyes against the torchlight, you wonder how long anyone could last here without breaking.
The night inside a medieval castle is not a gentle, hushed affair. You may have thought darkness would finally offer quiet, but instead it amplifies everything. Each drip of water echoing down a corridor, every creak of timber, every restless cough from a body nearby seems magnified. The stone holds sound differently, making whispers bounce like accusations and footsteps stretch like warnings. You lie on your makeshift bedding in the great hall, trying to ignore the straw prickling through the coarse blanket. Sleep does not come easily when the floor beneath you is as cold as a slab in a morgue. The rushes laid to soften the hardness carry their own problems: fleas, lice, and the sharp smell of stale ale and animal waste. With each twitch, something tiny and determined bites at your skin. Your neighbors are no better company. A guard snores loudly on the other side of the hall, his deep, rattling breath competing with the hacking cough of an older servant. Someone groans in their sleep, muttering nonsense words that twist into prayers or curses. And always, somewhere, a dog pads across the floorboards, nails clicking, nose sniffing for scraps left from the feast. The torches have been dimmed, though not fully extinguished. A few still burn low along the walls, throwing fitful orange light across the rafters. The air is smoky, thick enough to sting your throat. Castles feared fire, yet they also feared darkness. So the compromise is a haze of smoldering torchlight that steals clean air from your lungs and leaves your eyes stinging as you pretend to rest. Outside, the castle is never still. You hear the clank of armor as watchmen shuffle along the battlements, the low rumble of voices checking passwords at the gates. Sometimes it's the sudden bark of a dog that jolts you upright, heart racing. Your imagination leaps to bandits, spies, or worse, a siege in the dead of night. But more often than not, it's just a fox slinking too close or the restless noise of men ordered to remain awake when their bodies demand otherwise. And then there are the bells. The chapel bell may toll at midnight for prayers or to mark the changing of the watch. The deep iron note carries through every chamber, pulling you from the shallow, fitful doze you've managed. Religion does not sleep, and neither do those bound by its rhythm. If by some miracle you drift into a deeper sleep, you might be shaken awake by far less holy sounds. Rats, for one. Castles are magnets for them, thriving in kitchens, granaries, and along the edges of the hall. You hear their skittering feet in the rafters, their soft squeaks in the shadows.
Now and again, you feel the faint brush of one across your blanket and the horror of knowing your crust of bread has vanished. Sanitation is another midnight problem. Remember the garderobe, those narrow chutes built into the walls? Not everyone bothers to stumble that far in the darkness. More than a few simply make use of buckets in the corner of the hall. The smell creeps across the room before long, mixing with the smoke and the sweat into a foul perfume that makes you bury your nose in your sleeve. And if you need to relieve yourself, good luck. Stepping into the dark corridor, guided by a single tallow candle that sputters more than it shines, feels like wandering into another world. You pass arrow slits where cold wind rushes through, rattling the flame nearly out. Bats dart from the beams, disturbed by your light. The air is icy, the stones damp beneath your feet. When you finally find the garderobe, the chill cuts to the bone. You perch above the open chute, trying not to think about the drop or the fact that it empties directly outside the wall into the night air. Returning to the hall, you realize your body is shaking from the cold. Others are curled tightly, pulling cloaks over their heads, forming small huddles for warmth. You hesitate to join them, strangers pressed together out of necessity, trading fleas as generously as heat, but the alternative is shivering until dawn. You edge closer, and though it is unpleasant, the shared warmth seeps into your bones at last. Still, there's no true rest here. The rhythm of the night is broken into fragments, each disturbance yanking you from the edge of sleep. Time drips forward, sluggish and cruel. When finally a faint gray glow filters through the narrow windows, you realize with bitter clarity that morning has arrived, though you hardly feel you've slept at all. And yet, the castle will expect you to rise, to work, to endure again. Dawn brings no mercy, only more stone, more labor, more discomfort, disguised as order.
Dawn in a medieval castle does not creep gently. It announces itself with a clamor. The chapel bell tolls before the sun has even cleared the horizon, dragging you up from whatever shallow, miserable sleep you've managed. The sound reverberates through the stone, rattling in your skull like a personal summons. You groan, but no one else hesitates. Bodies rise from the rushes in the hall, stretching stiff joints, shaking lice from blankets, rubbing smoke-stung eyes. The first sensation is cold. It seems colder than last night, though you know the stone simply holds its chill until morning. Your breath puffs in the air as you sit up. Your back aches from the floor, your skin itches from unseen passengers, and the taste of smoke still coats your tongue. And before you've even found your footing, you're expected to move. Chores begin instantly. Buckets must be filled from the well, though the water feels like liquid ice as you haul it up, sloshing against your shins. Fires must be coaxed back to life in the kitchens and halls. A servant thrusts a bundle of damp sticks at you, ordering you to stack them by the hearth. The smoke fills your nose as the first flames lick upward, warming only the smallest circle of space. Breakfast is not a feast. Forget bacon and eggs. You're handed yesterday's pottage, reheated until it's a bubbling mass of mush. A stale heel of bread accompanies it, perhaps softened in the broth if you're lucky. Nobles may get fresh bread, cheese, or even a slice of cold meat left from the Lord's table. You, however, eat quickly and without fuss, because your day's work waits. Around you, the castle stirs in a precise rhythm. Knights rise to sharpen swords and oil armor. Squires scurry with buckets of sand and cloths to polish steel until it gleams. Falconers are already outside, calling to their birds as leather hoods are lifted and wings stretch in the early chill. Maids sweep rushes aside, scattering yesterday's filth to replace it with fresh herbs and reeds. It is a system running on duty, each person turning like a cog in the wheel. And you are one of those cogs now. You're ordered to help carry provisions from the storerooms, barrels of salted fish and meat, sacks of barley, jugs of ale, all impossibly heavy, all needing to be hauled up narrow stairs designed more for defense than convenience. Your shoulders scream, your palms blister. Halfway up the spiral staircase, you pause, gasping, but the servant behind you snarls to move faster. You press on, head spinning from exertion in the tight air of the stairwell. In the courtyard, the world is already alive with noise. The clang of a hammer from the blacksmith's forge, the crack of wood as carpenters split timbers, the calls of livestock being herded towards pens. Geese honk angrily, chickens scatter underfoot, and pigs root through scraps near the midden heap. The smell is indescribable. Animal dung, rotting refuse, and smoke all layered together. You try to remind yourself this is normal here. People are used to it. They do not wrinkle their noses at the odors, nor do they complain about the grime. To them, this is survival. To you, it feels like punishment, dressed in routine. The castle guards drill in formation nearby, spears rising and falling in practiced rhythm. Their boots stamp on the packed earth, creating clouds of dust. You find yourself staring, almost envious. At least their misery is structured, almost noble compared to hauling fish up staircases. But then you notice their sweat, the way their armor traps heat, the fatigue in their faces even this early in the day. No one escapes hardship here. Then comes the chapel service. You're herded inside with the others, the air heavy with incense. The priest chants in Latin, a language most don't even understand. You kneel on the cold stone floor, your knees quickly aching. The smell of wax and incense mixes with damp wool cloaks, sweat, and unwashed hair. It feels less like holy revelation and more like endurance. Religion here is not optional. It is the rhythm of life, woven into every hour. Afterwards, work resumes as if no pause occurred. You are sent to help in the kitchens, scraping the blackened bottoms of cauldrons, fetching water, chopping onions until your eyes stream. The cook yells constantly, waving a ladle like a weapon. Knives flash dangerously close to your fingers. The kitchen is hot, smoky, and chaotic, a world of its own, ruled by temper and necessity. You wonder how long you can last. You haven't even seen midday, and already your arms ache, your stomach feels unsettled, and your head throbs from the relentless noise. Each task flows into the next without pause, without mercy. The castle does not care if you are tired. The castle does not care if you are cold, hungry, or blistered. The castle runs because every body inside it works until it breaks. And you realize, as the morning stretches into late morning, that this life is not about living in a grand fortress of glory. It is about survival in stone, dressed in duty, where your comfort is irrelevant, and your endurance is the only thing that matters. Late morning inside the castle grinds forward with the same merciless rhythm as the bells. The sun is climbing higher now, streaming pale shafts of light through arrow slits that were never designed to brighten anyone's day. They throw more shadows than illumination, reminding you this place was built to repel armies, not to make life pleasant for the people trapped inside it. You've barely finished hauling water and scrubbing pots before someone barks new orders. Servants in a castle rarely linger in one task. You are passed around like a tool, shifted wherever extra hands are needed. Today, that means following a steward into storerooms deep in the underbelly of the fortress. The air down here is damp, heavy, and cool. Barrels line the walls, stacked with salted meat and dried fish, their briny stink seeping into your clothes as soon as you enter. Sacks of grain slump in the corners, some gnawed open by rats. You see their beady eyes watching from beams overhead, daring you to chase them. The steward doesn't even blink. Rats are as natural a part of castle life as stone walls and prayer. You're handed a ledger, not to write in, of course, but to carry while the steward mutters numbers, checking the supplies. You shuffle along behind, staring at the endless repetition. Flour, barley, oats, salted pork, dried peas. Food in a castle isn't a feast of abundance.
It's a calculation of survival. Everything must stretch through seasons, through failed harvests, through sieges. Each portion is measured against the uncertainty of tomorrow. When you finally emerge back into daylight, blinking at the sudden brightness, you stumble straight into the path of a nobleman and his retinue. Instantly, the atmosphere shifts. Servants bow their heads, stepping aside, eyes lowered. You mimic them clumsily, though too slowly, and feel the sharp sting of a glance that cuts colder than the morning wind. Hierarchy in the castle is absolute. The Lord's word carries weight heavier than stone, his family and favored knights moving like planets in orbit around him. Your mistake is small, but mistakes in this world carry consequences. A rebuke now, perhaps a beating later, or simply a reputation as that clumsy servant. Reputation is currency, and yours is already thin. The nobleman passes, his cloak trailing along the rushes, his boots so clean you wonder if they've ever touched mud. He smells faintly of imported spice and oil, luxuries that would buy your entire family's meal for weeks. You watch him vanish into the solar and realize how far the gulf between you and him really is. Stone walls enclose both of you, but it may as well be different planets. Your own tasks continue without pause. You are sent to the laundry yard where linens are beaten with paddles against flat stones, soap made from lye stinging your hands raw. The water is icy and splashes soak through your shoes, numbing your toes. Here the women chatter, their voices carrying stories, gossip, and songs. Some complain about their masters, others laugh about a knight's clumsy attempt at courtship. You almost feel camaraderie, until the steward appears again, reminding you that too much chatter is wasted time. Around midday, the castle begins shifting toward the main meal again. The kitchen roars back into chaos, fires flare, spits creak under the weight of roasting birds, knives chop furiously through vegetables. The smell is rich, smoky, and greasy, clinging to your skin until you're part of it. Servants rush past with trays and jugs, everyone moving at once in a dance that feels half rehearsed, half desperate improvisation. You're drafted into serving in the great hall. Suddenly, you're standing at the edge of the feasting tables, balancing a jug of ale so heavy your wrist trembles. You pour carefully, terrified of spilling even a drop on a noble's sleeve. You keep your head low, listening as conversations swirl above you. Politics, hunts, marriages, alliances, words that will shape the fate of peasants far outside these walls, none of which have any say in them. The etiquette here is exhausting. Nobles expect to be served without delay, cups filled before they're empty, dishes replaced before they're scraped bare. One wrong move could mean a scolding or worse. Yet you watch them tear into their food with greasy fingers, tossing bones beneath the table for dogs. Elegance is a performance, but mess is reality. When the meal winds down, the Lord rises again, signaling its end. Nobles drift back to their chambers, squires back to the yard, servants back to their endless cycles of cleaning and carrying. The scraps left behind are gathered for the lower ranks, you among them. What's left isn't generous. Soggy bread trenchers, gnawed bones with faint shreds of meat, bowls of pottage thinned to little more than flavored water. Still, hunger makes even the scraps taste necessary. You eat quickly, seated on a bench at the far end of the hall, not trying to notice the noble's dog watching you with sharp eyes, hoping for what little you have. You toss it a crust, not out of kindness, but to stop it staring. Then it's back to labor, back to being invisible in the machinery of the castle. The walls press in again, the air thick with smoke and sweat, the sense of hierarchy a constant weight on your shoulders. You catch yourself thinking, not for the first time, that the castle may look like a marvel of power and safety from the outside, but living within its walls feels less like privilege and more like a slow kind of prison.
The afternoon inside the castle stretches out like a gauntlet. Your body already aches from the morning's labor, but there's no concept of rest here. The sun may be high, but instead of reprieve, it signals new duties. The courtyard rattles with noise again, clashing weapons, barking orders, hooves stamping against packed dirt. The air is alive with dust and smoke, and you're shoved straight back into the rhythm. Knights are drilling in formation. The clang of sword against shield rings out in sharp, metallic bursts, carrying through the entire yard. Squires run to fetch weapons, haul shields, and collect sweat-soaked gambesons from their masters. The scent of leather, iron, and unwashed bodies mixes into a heavy fog. You're roped into helping, lugging buckets of water to cool throats and soak tunics. It sounds simple until you realize each bucket weighs more than you care to admit, and the knights drain them faster than you can refill. You pause long enough to watch one of the squires sparring. He's your age, maybe younger, his face slick with sweat, his arms shaking as he blocks another blow. The knight he faces laughs as his strike lands, sending the boy sprawling in the dirt. There's no pity here. Training is pain, and pain is the price of survival. You're grateful you're not the one holding the sword, until someone snaps at you to move faster with the buckets. Elsewhere, preparations are being made for the hunt. Hunting is the Lord's entertainment, his excuse to parade falcons, hounds, and finely bred horses. You're ordered to help the falconers, holding a bird of prey on a gloved arm while its sharp talons dig uncomfortably into the leather. The bird twitches, restless, its piercing eyes fixed on you in a way that feels more threatening than noble. Falconry may be the sport of the elite, but for the servants handling the animals, it's another layer of stress and scratches. Not everyone enjoys the afternoon with hunts and drills. Punishments are often carried out in this window of time, as though misery requires daylight. You're unlucky enough to witness one. A servant caught stealing bread is dragged into the yard, tied to a post, and flogged. The crack of the whip against flesh silences the chatter, each strike echoing off the stone walls. The crowd watches, some grim-faced, some almost entertained. You feel sick, the taste of bile sharp in your throat, but you force yourself not to flinch. Mercy is not admired here. Justice is meant to be seen, and fear is part of the lesson. Afterward, you're sent to the kitchens again, where the cook shoves a knife into your hand and points at a mound of turnips. Chopping, always chopping, until your fingers are stiff and numb. Sweat runs down your back from the heat of the hearth. You long for air, for quiet, but the castle has neither. You notice how time inside these walls has no softness. Every hour is carved into duty, every duty into exhaustion. No one asks if you're hungry or tired. No one cares if your blisters sting or your arms ache. You're useful until you're not, and when you're not, you're replaceable. Still, glimpses of life bleed through. In the hall, a pair of children chase each other, wooden toys clattering on the floor. In the chapel, a priest mutters evening prayers over the drone of beeswax candles. A maid hums as she beats dust from a tapestry, her voice carrying faintly through the corridors. The castle is not just stone and orders. It is hundreds of small human sounds stitched together, moments of survival hidden in plain sight. Yet for you, the weight only grows heavier as the shadows lengthen. The yard clears, the knights shed their armor, the Lord returns from his hunt with falcons perched proudly and dogs dragging bloody rabbits behind them. The servants swarm again, hauling, cleaning, preparing for the evening meal. You're beginning to realize there is no afternoon lull in a medieval castle. There is only the next demand, the next command, the next chance for exhaustion to deepen its grip. And as the bells toll to signal the end of the workday, you understand something cruel. The day never truly ends here. It only shifts shape, carrying you from labor into spectacle, from survival into endurance. The evening meal is the heartbeat of the castle, and if you thought the chaos of the day was behind you, you were painfully wrong. This is not dinner in the modern sense, with a plate to yourself, maybe a glass of water, and peace to chew.
This is theater disguised as supper, politics hidden under meat pies, and your role in it is somewhere between stagehand and disposable prop. The Great Hall is the stage. Torches sputter against the damp stone walls, their smoke curling into a haze that stings your eyes and clogs your lungs. The rushes on the floor, those reeds meant to soften the stone, are slick with old grease and scraps of discarded bones. The smell is a mixture of roast meat, stale ale, and humanity packed too tightly into one echoing chamber. You don't sit at the table. You hover, waiting, carrying, refilling, dodging drunken hands that may slap your back one moment and strike your cheek the next. At the high table sits the Lord, his family, and the honored guests. Their trenchers, flat slabs of stale bread that serve as plates, groan under roasted boar, game birds still glistening with fat, and stews thick enough to disguise any questionable meat tossed inside. You won't taste a bite of it, of course. If you're lucky, you'll gnaw on the discarded trenchers after they're too soggy with meat juice for noble appetites. Imagine being excited to eat someone else's dinner plate. Welcome to your reality. You notice the spectacle is as important as the food. Musicians pluck at lutes in the corner, their songs drowned by laughter and shouting. A jester tumbles clumsily near the hearth, bells jingling, his painted grin a little too stiff to hide the desperation in his eyes. Servants like you scurry with pitchers of ale and wine, careful not to spill a drop, because spilling is not a small mistake. It's an insult, and an insult can end with you thrown into the courtyard mud or worse. The noise is deafening. Knives scrape against trenchers, bones crack between teeth, hounds bark at scraps hurled their way. And then there are the burps, the slurps, the coughs of men choking slightly before gulping down more. If you thought fine dining was refined, think again. Medieval feasting is loud, messy, and unapologetically crude. Now let's talk hygiene. You won't find forks here. Not really. Fingers do the work, greasy and slick, wiping onto the nearest cloth, or sometimes just onto the rushes at your feet. Imagine being asked to clean this floor later, crouching down to scrape congealed fat from between reeds, gagging as the smell clings to your nails. And don't assume people wash their hands often. If you're lucky, a basin is passed around at the start and end of the meal, the water darkening quickly with grease and dirt. You try not to think about how many hands have dipped into the same bowl. Your job isn't just about serving, it's about reading the room. When the Lord raises a cup, you must be ready with the pitcher. When a guest gestures for more venison, you must appear before his patience thins. And you must always be alert, because drunken nobles love sport. Maybe they'll throw bones at each other, maybe at you. Maybe one will call you over only to laugh as another kicks your legs out. It's all entertainment, and you're the joke. Some servants aren't so fortunate. Entertainers who fail to amuse, or kitchen boys who burn the meat, can become examples. You see a boy dragged by the ear, forced to kneel while the steward shouts over the din. His crime? Dropping a tray. The punishment is swift and humiliating. A cuff to the head, a shove into the rushes, the laughter of half the hall ringing in his ears. You take note. Stumble once, and you could be next. And then there's the food itself. Yes, it looks rich, but it carries dangers of its own. Meat often isn't fresh. It's salted, smoked, or spiced to disguise the rot. Spices are precious, but they also double as cover-ups for questionable flavors.
You, scraping trenchers later, might taste the sourness of pork gone bad, or the bitterness of ale that's been watered down and left too long in the cask. Food poisoning isn't a rare accident here. It's practically a seasonal guest. When the feast finally slows, when bellies are swollen and cups are drained, the aftermath is yours to manage. The tables are littered with bones, grease, half-gnawed crusts. Dogs lick at the floor, fighting over scraps, snarling as you reach to sweep them away. Your stomach growls, but you must wait, picking carefully through what's left, claiming what you can without being noticed. It's not dignity, it's survival. And just when you think the meal is done, the music swells again. Some nobles rise to dance, others call for more drink, and you, dragging trays heavy with dirty trenchers, realize there is no clear ending. The feast dissolves slowly into drunken brawls, into spilled wine soaking the rushes, into staggering footsteps leading toward the stairs. This is dinner in a castle. Not a quiet evening, not a family meal. It's chaos masquerading as ceremony, and you, invisible yet indispensable, are the glue holding the spectacle together. Unseen, unthanked, and always one mistake away from ruin. And now that you've survived the feast, the castle shifts once again. Night falls, but don't be fooled into thinking darkness brings peace. In a medieval castle, the night has its own terrors, its own demands, and its own price.
Night has finally crept over the castle, but don't mistake the setting sun for relief. The great hall may quiet, the torches dim, but the silence is heavy, restless, the kind of silence that hums with menace, because here, darkness is not rest. It's exposure, it's discomfort, it's dread wrapped in shadows. Let's start with where you'll sleep. Unless you're a noble, you don't have a chamber to yourself. You don't even have a bed. You're on the floor of the hall or in a drafty corridor, curled on a bundle of straw that scratches your skin and smells faintly of damp hay and urine. If you're lucky, someone remembered to scatter new rushes, though they're rarely fresh. More often, they're layered with grease from dinner, flecks of bone, and crawling insects that feast on scraps. You tuck your cloak tighter, but the draft that slips under the doors and through cracks in the stone still bites at your neck. It's dark, truly dark, the kind of pitch-black modern life has erased. There's no gentle glow from street lamps, no reassuring hum of an appliance, only the faint flicker of a dying torch, shadows stretching long and uncertain. The fire in the great hearth sputters, but servants don't get much fuel. Wood is too precious to waste on keeping you comfortable. You lie awake, shivering, listening to the uneven breathing of others sprawled nearby. And then the sounds start. Castles at night are never quiet. You hear the scurry of rats along the rafters, their claws scratching against the wood. They're searching for crumbs left from the feast, and sometimes they find more than crumbs. You remember the servant who woke to a rat chewing the leather strap of his shoe while his foot was still in it. The dogs chained near the hall growl low in their throats, catching scents you can't see. Outside, the wind moans through arrow slits, carrying the faint smell of damp stone and latrines. There are people awake too, guards patrolling, boots striking unevenly on the floor above. Every so often, a shout or the clang of a weapon echoes down the stairwell, a reminder that night watch is not about calm, but about readiness for attack. You imagine, half dreaming, what would happen if raiders struck now.
No alarms like modern sirens, just bells clanging, people screaming, chaos in total darkness. Sleep is fragile because you know it could be ripped away at any second. And let's not forget fire. The castle is stone, yes, but the roofs, floors, and furnishings are timber. One stray ember from the hearth, one torch falling from its sconce, and flames could race through the hall before you even crawl to your knees. Servants know the rules. Tend the fire, watch the torches, don't let anything smolder unattended. But accidents happen. You've heard the stories of castles gutted in the night, of servants trapped in smoke-filled chambers, of lords forced to flee barefoot into the cold air. Every creak of wood in the dark makes you wonder if tonight will be that night. Even if disaster doesn't strike, the human dangers lurk just as near. A drunken noble stumbling from the hall might mistake you for entertainment, or worse. Women especially sleep lightly, wary of footsteps in the dark, clutching knives or sticks for protection that rarely helps. Hierarchies don't sleep, they only slur and stagger. You keep your eyes down, your breath even, praying to remain invisible. And as for comfort, forget it. Fleas thrive in the straw, biting into your ankles, your waist, your scalp. Lice burrow into your hair, and the itching never stops. You scratch until the skin breaks, only to start again minutes later. Some servants wear caps to bed to slow the crawling, but nothing truly works. You can almost feel the parasites exploring your skin, and the thought of drifting off to that sensation is its own nightmare. And still, sleep comes eventually. Exhaustion forces it. Your body sinks despite the scratching, the cold, the smells. You dream poorly, half waking at every sound. Sometimes you're roused outright to carry water to a guard, to chase a stray dog from the hall, to stoke the hearth when the fire drops too low. Your rest is borrowed, never owned, stolen in fragments before dawn pries open the sky again. So, here's the truth. Night in a medieval castle isn't peaceful. It's a vigil. It's surviving until morning, hoping the rats keep their distance, the guards don't rouse you, the nobles ignore you, and the fire holds. You wake up groggy, aching and itching, but grateful that you woke at all. Because in a place like this, even making it to morning counts as a kind of victory. And as the first bells of dawn echo against the stone, dragging you back into the endless grind, you realize something cruelly simple. There was no safe hour in a medieval castle. Not in the blazing sun of the yard, not in the smoke of the feast, and certainly not in the haunted silence of the night.
Dawn comes not gently, but with bells. The first clang splits the fragile veil of sleep like a hammer, and you jerk awake, stiff from the stone floor and the straw that somehow found its way into your clothes, your hair, even your mouth. There's no snooze button, no rolling over for 5 more minutes. The castle wakes when it's told to, and so do you. Your first task is fire. The great hall smells of yesterday's feast gone sour. Meat fat hardened on trenchers, ale soaking into the rushes, stale smoke lingering low in the rafters. Before anyone important descends, those smells must be masked. You're up on your knees, fumbling to stir last night's ashes, coaxing embers to life with twigs and a lungful of breath. If you fail, you'll be sent out into the freezing courtyard to fetch fresh wood before the sun is even up. Your fingers are numb, your eyes sting with soot, but the hearth roars again, spitting sparks that briefly make you feel victorious. Of course, victory is fleeting. Now comes the cleaning. The great hall looks like a battlefield. Bones scattered underfoot, overturned cups sticky with wine, greasy trenchers stacked like collapsed walls. Dogs nose through the debris, snarling if you push them aside. You bend, scrape, sweep, gagging at the mixture of rot and urine that's been mashed into the rushes. Someone spilled lamp oil during the feast, and the reek clings to your throat. You're not scrubbing for glory. You're scrubbing to erase the evidence that last night ever happened. As the fire strengthens, you're ordered to carry buckets of water to the Lord's chambers. Each bucket sloshes heavy against your leg, threatening to spill on the stairs that spiral endlessly upward. There's no banister to steady yourself, and your shoulder burns from the weight. This water is for washing, though don't imagine hot baths and soap. It's for rinsing hands, faces, maybe a ceremonial splash across the Lord's forehead to mark the new day. You might glimpse him half awake, hair wild, eyes bleary, but you keep yours down. Eye contact is not your privilege. Meanwhile, the kitchens thunder back to life. Cooks bark orders, boys run in every direction, fires flare under iron pots. The smell of porridge thick with barley fills the air. It's breakfast, but not for you yet. You're busy grinding grain at the mill, your arms aching as you turn the heavy stone, or pounding garlic into paste for flavor. The nobles will get bread and cheese, maybe eggs, maybe a slice of salted pork. You'll make do later with a crust that's gone too hard to serve, or spoonfuls scraped from the bottom of a pot. The castle doesn't just wake, it resets. Chambermaids beat dust from tapestries, their coughing echoing off the stone. Grooms in the stables shovel muck from stalls, the stench drifting through the courtyard. Guards change shifts, stamping their feet against the morning chill, muttering about long nights and stiff backs. Everywhere you turn, there's motion, noise, a rhythm that seems orchestrated, yet frays at every edge. You feel the weight of repetition. You cleaned last night, and you'll clean again tonight. You carried water yesterday, and you'll carry it tomorrow. The tasks loop endlessly, like the bells that toll with monotonous certainty. Medieval life inside a castle is not about progress. It's about maintenance. You don't move forward, you just keep things from collapsing. Sometimes, if you're quick, you steal a moment for yourself. Maybe a bite of porridge from a bowl you're meant to deliver, eaten in haste before anyone notices. Maybe a glance out the arrow slit at the dawn mist settling over the fields. The outside world looks calm, soft, almost beautiful. But you don't belong there. You belong here, in the guts of the castle, where beauty is glimpsed only through cracks. And just when you think you've found a rhythm, scrub, carry, grind, serve, the bells ring again, signaling the start of Mass in the chapel. Your stomach is empty, your back is already sore, and yet you're expected to kneel on cold stone and mouth prayers. Religion saturates the castle like smoke. It's not optional, it's obligation. You shuffle into line, lips moving in time with the chant, your mind wandering back to the fire you hope hasn't gone out in the hall. Morning in a medieval castle is not about freshness. It's about restoring order, pretending the chaos of the previous night never happened, and preparing to endure the chaos of the day ahead. You rise with the sun, not to live, but to reset the same grind again and again. And as the service ends, as the nobles peel away towards their breakfast, and the servants scatter back to their posts, you feel the truth settle in your bones. Dawn doesn't bring new beginnings here. It only drags you back into the cycle.
Mid-morning in the castle doesn't glide forward, it grinds. By the time the sun has risen high enough to filter weakly through the narrow arrow slits, you're already deep in the machinery of labor, gears turning whether you're ready or not. The castle itself feels like a living thing, a creature that must be constantly fed, cleaned, patched, and appeased, and you're one of the countless little parts keeping it alive. The kitchens are roaring again, hotter and louder than before. Spits creak under the weight of roasting meat, the smell of fat hissing into the fire, while cauldrons bubble with pottages thickened by barley, peas, and whatever vegetables survived the storage cellars. You're sent down into those very cellars, where the air is damp and earthy, walls dripping with condensation. Barrels of ale line the walls, Salted fish hang from hooks, wheels of cheese sweat in the gloom. Rats scatter at your lantern's glow, their tails vanishing into cracks, their teeth having already chewed through sacks of grain. You scoop what's left into baskets, careful not to let the steward see how much has been lost to vermin. Above you, repairs are underway. Carpenters hammer new boards across drafty shutters, the noise rattling in your skull. Masons chip at the walls, patching mortar where damp threatens to eat through the stone. The castle looks permanent, eternal, but in truth it is fragile, always under siege from weather, rot, and the steady decay of time. Every day someone is mending, reinforcing, dragging heavy loads of stone or timber, trying to keep the fortress from sagging in on itself. You are roped into errands that scatter you across the castle. One moment you're scrubbing soot from a fireplace until your nails split, the next you're carrying a message from the steward to the chapel, your legs burning from climbing the spiral stairs. Those stairs are narrow, twisting, a trap as much as a design. You hug the inner curve to let a knight pass, the metal of his armor scraping the wall, his gauntlet nearly clipping your head. You're invisible, yet always in someone's way. The smells of the castle shift with the work. Sweat and wood dust in the carpenter's loft, iron and singed cloth where the smith pounds out repairs to a helmet, sour milk and herbs in the still room where medicines are being mixed. Every corridor has its own odor, some bearable, others stomach-turning. The privies never let you forget their presence, the stink seeping from the cesspit and rising like an invisible fog. You grow used to it in the way you grow used to a stone in your shoe, constant, irritating, impossible to escape. At times you glimpse the nobles, gliding through all this as though it barely exists. A lady trails past with her women, silk skirts brushing the floor you just scrubbed, her perfume clashing with the reek of the rushes. She doesn't look at you. Her conversation, soft and sharp, is about hawks and tapestries, not about the fact that you are carrying a slopping bucket of waste right behind her. The divide between your world and theirs is unbridgeable, and the walls of the castle enforce it as effectively as any law. There's moments of danger, too, the kind you don't expect. A falcon breaks loose in the mews, its wings battering wildly, talons raking the air as you and the others duck for cover. A pot slips from a shelf in the kitchen, shattering at your feet in an explosion of boiling stew. A horse in the stables rears suddenly, hooves lashing the air, sending a groom sprawling with a broken arm. The castle is alive with hazards, each one a reminder that survival here is not guaranteed, even when you're not at war. And then there's the errands beyond the walls. Sometimes you're sent into the surrounding village to fetch supplies, a rare breath of open air. But even outside, the castle's needs cling to you. You barter for eggs, haggle over sacks of onions, haul bundles of firewood back through the gate. The villagers eye you with suspicion or pity. You're not quite one of them anymore, bound instead to the stone jaws of the fortress. By the time mid-morning slips toward noon, your body is already frayed. Your shoulders ache from hauling, your knees are black with soot and straw, your stomach growls but is ignored. And yet the work never pauses. It shifts. When one fire is stoked, another guttering hearth demands fuel. When one pot is stirred, another must be scrubbed clean. When one room is swept, another reeks too strongly to be left any longer. The castle is greedy. It consumes every scrap of food, every ounce of labor, every hour of your day. And you, like the others, feed it because you must, because there's no other life allowed behind these walls. So you keep moving, keep carrying, keep enduring, while the sun creeps higher, unnoticed. Noon will come, and with it another surge of demands. And though you don't know it yet, the castle will only tighten its grip as the day grows older.
Noon in the castle doesn't announce itself with a break. There's no cheerful whistle, no ringing school bell, no neat pause for a sandwich and 15 minutes of peace. Instead, the rhythm of work swells into another wave. The bells toll again, echoing down every corridor.
not as an invitation to rest, but as a reminder that it is once more time to feed the beast. The kitchens surge into a frenzy. The hearth blazes hot enough to sting your cheeks. Spits groan under roasting meat, and the scent of boiling pottage mingles with smoke until your eyes water. You're ordered to haul trays up to the great hall, your arms trembling from the weight of trenchers and steaming bowls. Nobles and their households drift back into place, their chatter swelling, as though the day has only just begun for them. For you, the day has been grinding for hours already, and now you stand in the wings of their stage again. The food is simpler than the evening feast, but still designed to impress. Bread, cheese, salted meats, perhaps a pie if supplies allow. You serve it silently, dodging elbows and sharp words. When a lord laughs, you're expected to smile faintly in the background. When he scowls, you lower your eyes and hope he forgets you exist. And here's the part most people never imagine. While nobles dine, you don't. You're lucky to get the scraps later. As you pass by the tables, your stomach gnaws at itself, the scent of warm bread tormenting you. Imagine carrying a steaming pie to the high table, knowing you'll be licking cold crumbs off a trencher hours later. That's not dramatization, that's the daily reality. When the nobles finish, the cycle repeats. Scraps tossed aside, trenchers soggy with grease, dogs snapping up bones, and you on your knees sweeping, scraping, gathering. Your hands are raw, your back stiff, but there's no pause, because the castle never waits for you. After the midday meal, the work shifts into its second act. The nobles retreat into chambers or out into the courtyard, and servants scramble to keep pace. Laundry must be beaten and boiled in huge cauldrons, the steam filling the yard with a sour mist. Tapestries are shaken outside, sending dust swirling into the sunlight. You might be sent to fetch water again, trudging the same paths, bucket handles digging deeper into your palms until the skin blisters. And the heat of the day doesn't help. The courtyard bakes in the sun, dust rising in choking clouds as men-at-arms spar. The clang of steel on steel echoes, sharp and repetitive, a hammer on your nerves. Squires scurry underfoot, carrying helms and gauntlets, while you're tasked with fetching water to cool the fighters. By the time you've dragged a bucket across the yard, half is sloshed away, soaking your legs, and still the men drink it greedily, demanding more. Exhaustion sharpens the tension between servants. A sharp word over who gets the broom, a shove in the stairwell when someone's too slow, a hissed curse when a pitcher is dropped. There's no time to nurse pride, but anger simmers because everyone here is stretched thin, their lives controlled by bells and masters who don't notice their maims. Sometimes a fight breaks out among the lowest ranks, fists flying in the yard until a steward intervenes with blows harsher than the quarrel deserved. And always the dangers lurk. Carrying boiling water across uneven flagstones, you slip and scald your foot, the pain radiating up your leg as you bite your tongue not to cry out. A knight passing by laughs, not cruelly, not kindly, simply amused, as though your pain is entertainment. You grit your teeth, bow your head, and keep hobbling. If you're unlucky, you're summoned to assist with repairs in the outer walls. It sounds simple, hauling stones, passing mortar, but the sun beats down, your shoulders strain, and each trip up the scaffolding feels like a dare. One slip, one loose board, and you'd fall into the moat below. And what would happen then? The work wouldn't stop. Someone else would take your place. The castle doesn't care for individual bodies. It cares only that the tasks are done. By mid-afternoon, your muscles scream, your stomach is hollow, your head pounds from smoke and sun. And yet, you keep moving, because movement is survival. Stand still too long, and someone will notice, someone will point, someone will demand. This is the truth about noon in a medieval castle. It isn't a meal break. It isn't downtime. It's another turning of the wheel,
another surge of demands, another reminder that you are not living here, you are enduring. And as the sun begins to dip, shadows stretching across the yard, you understand something quietly cruel. You are halfway through the day, and already you feel finished. But the castle has no sympathy. There are still hours to go, and each one will demand more than the last.
Late afternoon in the castle carries a strange duality. For the lords and ladies, it is the hour of diversion, of leisure, of displaying refinement after the business of meals and morning matters. For you, it is when exhaustion begins to coil tight in your limbs, yet the demands only shift into another form. The sun dips lower, golden light slanting across the towers, but there is no golden hour for servants, only longer shadows and more tasks. The courtyard grows lively. Noblemen decide it is time for sport, and so horses are saddled, falcons hooded, hounds brought howling from their kennels. The hunt, to them, is a noble ritual, a way of showing mastery over land and beast alike. To you, it is an ordeal. You're sent to run ahead through the underbrush, clearing paths or flushing out prey with clattering sticks. Brambles snag your clothes, branches whip across your face, and mud clings heavy to your boots. You stumble, sweat, bleed, but the lords behind you roar with laughter at the thrill of pursuit, their hawks diving and hounds straining on the leash. For those not unlucky enough to be dragged into the forest, there are tournaments of a lighter sort in the yard. Jousting practice, wrestling matches, or archery practice. These amusements are never gentle. Wooden lances shatter, sending splinters flying into gawking crowds. Wrestling ends with bruises and bloodied lips. Archery practice with arrows occasionally finding their way into something or someone they were not meant to. And of course, servants are required at every turn, carrying shields, dragging away broken equipment, cleaning up the mess of accidents. The entertainment of nobles is simply the unpaid, unending labor of everyone else. In the Great Hall, meanwhile, ladies of rank practice their own refinements: music, embroidery, or board games like chess and tables. Don't imagine this means you escape labor here. Every lute string plucked has been tightened by your fingers earlier. Every embroidery hoop requires careful fetching of thread, skeins, and needles. Even arranging the board games falls to you. And though these tasks seem lighter than hunting or jousting, the scrutiny is far sharper. One wrong thread, one piece missing from a game, and you are scolded for disrupting their peace. But it is not only leisure that fills these hours. Punishment also finds its place in the late afternoon when tempers, dulled by heat and weariness, flare. A stable boy caught neglecting a horse might be whipped before the others, the lashes loud enough to echo against the walls. A maid accused of clumsiness could be dragged by the wrist into the yard, forced to kneel in humiliation. Justice in the castle is not blind nor fair. It is quick, loud, and meant to remind every servant watching what disobedience brings. All the while, your stomach gnaws at itself again. The scraps from noon were thin, and supper feels an eternity away. Yet you carry trays of spiced wine or sweetmeats to those lounging in chambers, their fingers sticky with sugar imported from far-off lands. You bow, you serve, you watch their indulgence, and you swallow your hunger like a second duty. The physical strain of the day catches up here too. The walls must be swept again, the rushes stirred to cover the smell of rot and waste, buckets of refuse carried outside and flung into the ditch. The air grows heavy with a mix of smoke, sweat, and the stench of waste gathering in corners no one bothers to clean properly. You breathe it in, cough it out, and press forward, because there is no other choice. The nobles laugh, The children play, the dogs bark, the bells tolled once more, and through it all, you remain invisible unless you fail. That is the secret rhythm of castle life. Your presence is only noticed when it falters. As long as you bend, carry, fetch, and scrub, you are part of the furniture. Slip once, stumble once, and suddenly you are the center of everyone's attention, though never in the way you would wish. And so the late afternoon drags on, gilded for some, grinding for others. The sun begins to sink toward the horizon, shadows stretching like long black fingers across the yard. You feel each shadow as a weight, pressing you further into weariness. But there is still supper to come, and with it the grandest display of all. Because in the medieval castle, nightfall doesn't mean rest. It means the most elaborate meal of the day, the one that demands the most labor, the most spectacle, the most polished service. And you, staggering through the late afternoon, know this truth well. The hardest hours are not yet over.
Late afternoon in the castle carries a strange duality. For the lords and ladies, it is the hour of diversion, of leisure, of displaying refinement after the business of meals and morning matters. For you, it is when exhaustion begins to coil tight in your limbs, yet the demands only shift into another form. The sun dips lower, golden light slanting across the towers, but there is no golden hour for servants, only longer shadows and more tasks. The courtyard grows lively. Noblemen decide it is time for sport, and so horses are saddled, falcons hooded, hounds brought howling from their kennels. The hunt, to them, is a noble ritual, a way of showing mastery over land and beast alike. To you, it is an ordeal. You're sent to run ahead through the underbrush, clearing paths or flushing out prey with clattering sticks. Brambles snag your clothes, branches whip across your face, and mud clings heavy to your boots. You stumble, sweat, bleed, but the lords behind you roar with laughter at the thrill of pursuit, their hawks diving and hounds straining on the leash. For those not unlucky enough to be dragged into the forest, there are tournaments of a lighter sort in the yard. Jousting practice, wrestling matches, or archery practice. These amusements are never gentle. Wooden lances shatter, sending splinters flying into gawking crowds. Wrestling ends with bruises and bloodied lips. Archery practice with arrows occasionally finding their way into something or someone they were not meant to. And of course, servants are required at every turn, carrying shields, dragging away broken equipment, cleaning up the mess of accidents. The entertainment of nobles is simply the unpaid, unending labor of everyone else. In the great hall, meanwhile, ladies of rank practice their own refinements: music, embroidery, or board games like chess and tables. Don't imagine this means you escape labor here. Every lute string plucked has been tightened by your fingers earlier. Every embroidery hoop requires careful fetching of thread, skeins, and needles. Even arranging the board games falls to you. And though these tasks seem lighter than hunting or jousting, the scrutiny is far sharper. One wrong thread, one piece missing from a game, and you are scolded for disrupting their peace. But it is not only leisure that fills these hours. Punishment also finds its place in the late afternoon when tempers, dulled by heat and weariness, flare. A stable boy caught neglecting a horse might be whipped before the others, the lashes loud enough to echo against the walls. A maid accused of clumsiness could be dragged by the wrist into the yard, forced to kneel in humiliation. Justice in the castle is not blind nor fair. It is quick, loud, and meant to remind every servant watching what disobedience brings. All the while, your stomach gnaws at itself again.
The scraps from noon were thin, and supper feels an eternity away. Yet you carry trays of spiced wine or sweetmeats to those lounging in chambers, their fingers sticky with sugar imported from far-off lands. You bow, you serve, you watch their indulgence, and you swallow your hunger like a second duty. The physical strain of the day catches up here too. The walls must be swept again, the rushes stirred to cover the smell of rot and waste, buckets of refuse carried outside and flung into the ditch. The air grows heavy with a mix of smoke, sweat, and the stench of waste gathering in corners no one bothers to clean properly. You breathe it in, cough it out, and press forward, because there is no other choice. The nobles laugh, the children play, the dogs bark, the bells tolled once more, and through it all, you remain invisible unless you fail. That is the secret rhythm of castle life. Your presence is only noticed when it falters. As long as you bend, carry, fetch, and scrub, you are part of the furniture. Slip once, stumble once, and suddenly you are the center of everyone's attention, though never in the way you would wish. And so the late afternoon drags on, gilded for some, grinding for others. The sun begins to sink toward the horizon, shadows stretching like long black fingers across the yard. You feel each shadow as a weight, pressing you further into weariness. But there is still supper to come, and with it the grandest display of all. Because in the medieval castle, nightfall doesn't mean rest. It means the most elaborate meal of the day, the one that demands the most labor, the most spectacle, the most polished service. And you, staggering through the late afternoon, know this truth well. The hardest hours are not yet over.